There are houses that look clean on the outside, but inside they feel heavy. You walk from one room to another, and your heart feels restless for no reason. Small things turn into fights. Peace leaves quickly. Sleep becomes troubled. Fear sits in the corners like an unwanted guest. And some people keep asking, why does this home feel dark even when the lights are on? Sometimes, when a place is not covered in peace, the atmosphere itself starts speaking. One sign is constant confusion. Nobody understands each other anymore. Words get twisted, love turns cold, and every conversation becomes an argument. Another sign is unusual fear when people feel watched, disturbed, or deeply uneasy in their own home without clear reason. A third sign is heavy nightmares and sleepless nights, when rest disappears and darkness seems stronger after sunset. A fourth sign is sudden hatred, bitterness, and division among family members, where the enemy of peace seems to sit at the table every day. A fifth sign is a strange heaviness, like sadness, anger, and oppression hanging in the air all the time. A sixth sign is when everything holy is avoided, when prayer feels hard, truth feels unwelcome, and the heart keeps resisting peace. And the seventh sign is repeated destruction. Things always breaking, joy always dying, progress always being delayed, as if something evil feeds on the disorder. But listen carefully. No darkness is greater than light. No evil presence can stay where truth, prayer, and faith rise with authority. A home can be cleansed, a family can be restored, peace can return. When people stop entertaining darkness and start standing in truth, what looked terrifying begins to lose its power. Fear has to bow, trouble has to move, and the house that once felt heavy can become a place of peace again. There are homes that shine on the outside and still feel broken on the inside. The floor is clean, the walls are standing, the doors are locked, the furniture is in place, but something in the atmosphere feels wrong. A person can enter such a house and feel it immediately, even before a word is spoken. The air feels heavy, the silence feels strange. The peace that should live in a home is missing, and in its place there is tension, fear, confusion, and a kind of hidden darkness that cannot be explained easily. Many people ignore these things because they do not want to believe that something deeper is happening. But the truth is that darkness does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it creeps in quietly. Sometimes it hides behind common problems. Sometimes it wears the mask of stress, anger, bitterness, and unrest. That is why people suffer for a long time without understanding why their home feels like a battlefield instead of a place of rest. A home is meant to be a shelter. It is meant to be the place where a tired soul can breathe, where children can laugh, where love can grow, where sleep can come gently, where the heart can settle and not stay on guard every second. But when darkness starts moving through a home, one of the first things it attacks is peace. Peace is delicate, and once it is disturbed, every other problem becomes easier to grow. A small disagreement becomes a war. A small misunderstanding becomes deep mistrust. A small weakness becomes a wide open door. That is why spiritual darkness in a home is often recognized not first by visible things, but by the way peace disappears little by little until the people inside the house no longer remember what calm feels like. One of the clearest ways darkness shows itself is through confusion. Confusion. is not always dramatic. It can begin with simple things. Family members stop understanding one another. Words are spoken with one meaning and received with another. The same conversation keeps producing pain again and again. Plans fail for no clear reason. Decisions feel clouded. People forget what they should remember and remember what hurts the most. It becomes difficult to think straight. It becomes difficult to agree. Even when everyone says they want peace, somehow the house keeps producing the opposite. Confusion is dangerous because it attacks clarity, and without clarity, people become easy to divide. When a home loses clear communication, trust weakens. When trust weakens, suspicion grows. When suspicion grows, love struggles to survive. A house under heavy darkness often feels like it is constantly on edge. Nobody can relax fully. Even happy moments feel temporary, as though everyone is waiting for something bad to happen next. This is not normal. Life has stress, yes, but a home should still carry moments of safety. When fear becomes the normal atmosphere, something is deeply wrong. People begin to sleep lightly, listening for every sound. Children may become restless. Adults may grow irritable. The body stays tense because the spirit feels no rest. Fear can settle into the walls of a place when darkness has been welcomed, entertained, or left unchallenged for too long. Fear steals joy before joy even has time to bloom. It makes people expect loss, expect conflict, expect failure, expect another painful night. Sometimes the fear is specific and sometimes it is not. A person may feel watched even when alone. Another may dread going into certain rooms. Someone else may feel sudden anxiety after sunset. There are homes where people avoid being alone in one part of the house but cannot explain why. There are places where peace changes the moment a person crosses a doorway. Some will dismiss this and say it is imagination, but not everything strange is imaginary. Not every heaviness is psychological. Some burdens are spiritual, and people feel them even when they cannot name them. The soul knows when something is off, even before the mind can explain it. Darkness also reveals itself through repeated conflict. Every family has disagreements, but there is a difference between normal human weakness and a house that seems to feed on arguments. In such a home, people may wake up already irritated. Small things spark major fights. Tone becomes sharper. Mercy becomes smaller. Mercy becomes harder. Pride grows taller. Instead of solving problems, people wound one another with words. Instead of listening, they accuse. Instead of healing, they reopen old pain. It feels as though division is always nearby, ready to rise at the smallest opportunity. This kind of atmosphere drains the soul because conflict stops being an event and becomes a pattern. It becomes the language of the house. Repeated conflict does more than create noise, it changes the emotional climate. Children raised in that climate learn to expect instability. Spouses begin to guard themselves rather than open their hearts. Relatives avoid visiting because the atmosphere feels strained. Even when no one is shouting, the house can feel full of leftover anger. Words spoken in rage do not disappear just because the room grows quiet afterwards. They leave marks, they create invisible bruises. And when darkness is influencing a place, people often find themselves saying things they regret, almost as if something keeps pushing the conversation toward destruction. toward destruction. Another sign is unusual heaviness in the heart. There are homes where people become sad the moment they enter, even if they were fine outside. There are places where motivation dies, where hope feels weak, where the soul feels pressed down for no obvious reason. This is different from the ordinary ups and downs of life. This is a weight that seems attached to the place itself. A person leaves the house and feels relief. A person returns and feels the pressure again. The home, which should refresh the soul, instead seems to drain it. This kind of heaviness can lead people into isolation. They stop wanting to sing, stop wanting to laugh, stop wanting to gather. The house becomes emotionally cold. People live under one roof, but feel far from one another. Where there is spiritual darkness, there is often disorder that keeps repeating. Things constantly go wrong. Important items go missing. Objects break more than normal. Money disappears quickly. Plans fall apart at the last minute. Repairs seem endless. Nothing stays settled for long. It is like trying to pour water into a bucket with holes. There is effort, but there is no lasting stability. Of course, not every inconvenience is spiritual, but when destruction becomes a consistent pattern in a home, when chaos keeps eating what should have lasted, wise people do not ignore it. Darkness loves disorder because disorder weakens people. It keeps them distracted, frustrated, tired, and less able to stand in peace. Sleep problems can also become a major sign of oppression in a home. Rest is one of the gifts people need most, and darkness often attacks that gift. People begin to toss and turn for hours. Nightmares become frequent. Strange dreams repeat. Children cry in their sleep. Adults wake up, exhausted even after many hours in bed. Some feel sudden dread in the middle of the night. Some wake with racing hearts. The night hours begin to feel hostile rather than restful. A home with strong spiritual unrest often becomes most uncomfortable when the world goes quiet. It is as if the darkness enjoys the silence because it can press harder on the mind when there are fewer distractions. Dreams themselves can leave a mark. Not every dream means something spiritual, but when disturbing dreams come again and again, bringing fear, torment, or a sense of defilement, people should not laugh it off too quickly. A restless night affects the whole next day. The mind becomes foggy, emotions become unstable, patience becomes thin. Over time, lack of peaceful sleep weakens a person's resistance. A tired soul is easier to discourage. A tired mind is easier to confuse. That is why troubled lights can be one of the ways darkness keeps its grip on a home. Another sign is resistance to anything holy. In a peaceful home, prayer may not always be perfect, but it is welcome. Truth may be challenging, but it is not hated. In a dark atmosphere, the opposite happens. Prayer feels difficult, delayed, or constantly interrupted. People who want to seek peace suddenly feel distracted or tired the moment they try to pray. Sacred words feel heavy rather than freeing. Anger rises when spiritual things are mentioned. Family members may become irritated for no clear reason when someone wants to bring light into the house. This resistance matters because darkness does not mind decoration, wealth, entertainment, or noise, but it resists anything that threatens its place. This kind of resistance can show itself in subtle ways. A person who was calm becomes aggressive during prayer. Strange interruptions happen every time there is an attempt to bring unity. Important spiritual conversations get cut off. People procrastinate on doing what they know would restore peace. The house may be full of activity, but empty of reverence. That emptiness becomes fertile ground for unrest. When truth is consistently pushed out, confusion comes in more boldly. When reverence disappears, disorder grows. Homes under darkness often carry a feeling of emotional instability. Joy rises and crashes quickly. One day seems hopeful, the next feels hopeless. Family members may swing from warmth to coldness without clear reason. This creates insecurity because no one knows what kind of atmosphere they will come home to. People begin walking carefully, trying not to trigger another wave of anger or sadness. A healthy home allows honesty and emotion, but it also carries enough peace to hold those things safely. A troubled home magnifies every emotion until people feel controlled by the atmosphere. Instead of guiding it, sometimes darkness attaches itself to old wounds that were never healed. A home may be carrying the residue of constant rage, abuse, betrayal, addiction, or hidden sin. Pain that is left unaddressed does not simply disappear. It shapes the atmosphere. It trains the people in the house to live defensively. It gives darkness familiar ground to move through. Bitterness becomes normal. Secrets become normal. Shame becomes normal. But what becomes normal is not always what is meant to remain. Many homes are suffering not only from what happened in them, but from what was never confronted honestly. Unhealed pain can become a doorway through which fear and oppression keep entering. There are also homes where isolation becomes stronger and stronger. People shut their doors. They stop eating together. They stop talking unless necessary. The family becomes a group of strangers sharing expenses and walls. This kind of emotional separation is another sign that peace has been deeply disturbed. Darkness loves isolation because isolated people are easier to burden. When someone feels alone, they are less likely to resist fear, less likely to speak up, less likely to seek help, less likely to believe restoration is possible. A silent house is not always a peaceful house. Sometimes the silence is the silence of distance, hurt, resentment, and spiritual exhaustion. Hurt, resentment, and spiritual exhaustion. Children are often affected quickly by a dark atmosphere. They may become unusually afraid, clingy, aggressive, or withdrawn. They may resist sleep, wake up crying, or refuse to enter certain spaces. They may act out in ways that reflect the tension around them. Children often sense what adults are trying to ignore. They may not have the words for it, but their behavior can reveal that the atmosphere of the home is harming them. A wise person pays attention when the most innocent members of the house stop feeling safe. The mind itself can suffer in a troubled home. Negative thoughts grow faster there. Hopelessness becomes persuasive. People begin to think nothing will ever change. They expect the worst. They stop planning for joy. They stop believing in peace. This mental burden is one of the cruelest effects of darkness because it does not only attack the present moment, it attacks the future. It tries to convince people that chaos is permanent, that fear is normal, that healing is impossible. Once a person believes that, they stop resisting and start surviving. But a home was not meant to be a survival zone. It was meant to be a place of life. Some people notice physical sensations too, headaches that intensify in the house, sudden exhaustion in certain rooms, a tight chest with no clear medical cause whenever they return home. While not every physical symptom is spiritual, the body often reacts to the environment the spirit is enduring. Continuous tension wears people down. A disturbed diatmere can affect posture, breathing, appetite, concentration, and patience. The burden becomes whole life burden. That is why it is so important not to dismiss signs too quickly. What seems small at first can become a chain over time. Darkness in a home often thrives where there has been compromise. Sometimes it enters through what people entertain without caution. Sometimes it comes through violent habits, persistent hatred, constant dishonesty, addiction, exploitation, or invitations to things that carry death rather than life. Sometimes people open doors through choices they thought were harmless and then wonder why the atmosphere changes. Not every problem comes from the same source, but wherever truth is rejected and destructive patterns are welcomed, peace weakens. And once peace weakens, and once peace weakens, fear finds room. Still, the most painful part of all this is that many people adapt to it. They stop noticing how abnormal it is. They call constant arguing just family. They call heavy fear just stress. They call sleepless nights just life. They call emotional coldness just personality. In doing so, they slowly make peace with what is destroying them. That is one of darkness's favorite victories. Not only to enter a home, but to become accepted there. Once people stop naming the problem, they stop resisting it. Once they stop resisting it, it grows stronger. But the signs matter because they wake people up. Confusion is a sign, fear is a sign, division is a sign, heavy sadness is a sign, sleepless torment is a sign. Sleepless torment is a sign. Resistance to truth is a sign. Repeated disorder is a sign. Isolation is a sign. Emotional instability is a sign. These are not things to romanticize or normalize. These are warnings that the atmosphere of a home is under attack and that what should be protected has been weakened. A person must become honest enough to say, "This is not how my home is supposed to feel. This constant unrest is not normal. This fear is not welcome. This confusion is not peace. This division is not love." When that honesty rises, the first crack appears in the whole darkness tries to maintain. Because darkness survives where everything stays vague, denied, and unnamed. The moment truth enters, confusion begins to lose its power. The moment someone recognizes that the home has become heavy with more than ordinary life struggles, the possibility of change becomes real. And that is why the first keynote is so important. Darkness often shows itself through fear, confusion, division, and unrest inside the home. It does not always begin with dramatic signs. It often begins with a stolen peace, then spreads into every corner until people feel like strangers to rest. It turns the place of comfort into a place of pressure. It turns conversations into conflict. It turns nights into torment. It turns closeness into distance. It turns hope into exhaustion. Yet the signs are not only warnings of danger, they are also signals that something hidden can be exposed, confront, D, and driven out. When people stop pretending that chaos is normal, they take the first step toward restoration. When they see the pattern clearly, they become able to reject it clearly And when truth stands up inside a troubled house, fear no longer gets to call itself peace, confusion no longer gets to call itself wisdom, and darkness no longer gets to hide behind ordinary looking pain. A troubled home does not have to remain troubled forever. A house that has carried fear can become a place of rest again. A family that has lived under pressure can breathe again. Rooms that once felt heavy can feel light again. Nights that were once full of unease can become peaceful again. This is the hope behind the second keynote. Peace returns when the home is filled with prayer, truth, faith, and spiritual authority. Darkness may try to settle in a home, but it is never the rightful owner. Fear may try to speak loudly, but it does not have the final word. Disorder may spread, tension may rise, and confusion may cloud the atmosphere, yet none of these things are greater than the power of truth and the peace that comes when people take their stand against what has disturbed their home. Many people think peace is something weak, soft, and passive, but true peace is not passive at all. True peace is strong. It is the kind of strength that enters chaos and refuses to bow to it. It is the calm that does not run from darkness, but confronts it. It is the order that pushes back confusion. It is the settled confidence that says this house will not belong to fear, hatred, torment, or oppression. Peace is not simply the absence of noise. A house can be silent and still deeply troubled. Peace is the presence of something holy, something clean, something steady. It is the atmosphere that grows when prayer is welcomed, when truth is honored, when faith is alive, and when people stop surrendering their home to whatever darkness tries to plant there. Prayer is often the first place where restoration begins. Not because prayer is a ritual to impress anyone, but because prayer opens the home to what is greater than human efforts. A family may try counseling, better communication, stricter routines, and all kinds of practical methods, and some of those things can help. But if the root of the disturbance is spiritual, then the response must also be spiritual. Prayer is the turning of the house back toward light. It is the moment people stop merely coping with the heaviness and start resisting it. In prayer, the home is no longer left uncovered. In prayer, the people inside the house stop speaking only to one another about the problem and begin addressing the deeper battle. Prayer changes the atmosphere because it invites truth where confusion lived and authority where fear tried to rule. There is something powerful about a home where prayer becomes regular instead of rare. It changes the spiritual temperature of the place. Darkness thrives where people are distracted, numb, divided, and silent. It weakens where people become watchful, sincere, and steady in prayer. Even simple prayer has weight when it is real. It does not have to be decorated with fancy language. It does not need performance. A sincere cry for peace can do more than a room full of empty words. A person standing in the middle of a troubled home and refusing to accept fear as normal has already begun to challenge what has been tolerated for too long. Prayer is often the first act of reclaiming the house. Prayer also gathers what fear has scattered. In troubled homes, people become isolated. They retreat into separate rooms, separate habits, separate worlds. Prayer brings them back to a shared center. It reminds them that they are not only individuals carrying private burdens, but people connected under one roof who need healing together. Even when only one person in the home begins to pray seriously, something changes. That person becomes a light bearer in a darkened space. One peaceful heart can begin shifting the atmosphere around it. One consistent voice calling for truth can interrupt the cycle of confusion. One determined soul refusing to entertain fear can weaken the hold that unrest has built over time. Yet prayer alone, if separated from truth, can become a moment without transformation. That is why truth is so important. A home cannot become peaceful while built on denial. Truth means naming what has been wrong. Truth means refusing to pretend that bitterness is normal, that constant rage is acceptable, that deception is harmless, that compromise has no consequences. Many homes remain troubled because the people inside them pray for peace while protecting the very things that poison peace. They ask for light, but keep feeding darkness through lies, cruelty, manipulation, hidden resentment, and destructive habits. Truth brings cleansing because truth exposes what must change. Truth is not always comfortable, but it is always necessary. A family cannot heal if no one is honest. If there has been cruelty, it must be admitted. If there has been neglect, it must be faced. If there has been addiction, secrecy, dishonesty, or spiritual compromise, these things must be brought into the open. Darkness hates exposure. It grows in secrecy, it grows in excuses, it grows where people protect appearances more than healing. But once truth enters the house, the false peace begins to break. People often fear truth because they think it will destroy the home, when in reality, it is the continued hiding that destroys it. Truth may shake things for a while, but it shakes them so they can be rebuilt rightly. A peaceful home is not a perfect home, it is a home while. Here, truth is not chased away. It is a home where correction is possible. It is a home where apology is not seen as weakness. It is a home where people are willing to confront what is damaging the atmosphere instead of adjusting to it. Truth creates clean ground. It removes the fog. It ends the confusion that allows destructive patterns to keep repeating. A house filled with truth begins to feel different because people stop speaking with double meanings, stop hiding behind masks, stop blaming everyone else for what they themselves have allowed. The air becomes lighter when deception loses its place. Faith is the next part of restoration. Because after prayer has begun and truth has been welcomed, people need the strength to believe that peace can actually return. Many families live in such long seasons of unrest that they stop expecting anything better. They become used to tension. They prepare for the next argument before the last one has fully ended. They treat fear as permanent and chaos as inherited. Faith breaks that agreement with hopelessness. Faith says this house is not condemned to remain under heaviness. Faith says what has been damaged can be repaired. Faith says darkness may have entered, but it does not own the future. Faith is not pretending that everything is already fine. It is not blind positivity. It is not closing the eyes to reality. Faith is the courage to look directly at the reality of a troubled home and still say, this will not be the final condition of this place. That kind of faith matters because hopelessness creates passivity. Once people believe nothing can change, they stop resisting, they stop praying, they stop speaking truth, they stop expecting peace. Faith restores movement, it restores determination. It gives people the strength to keep cleansing the atmosphere of the home even when change feels slow. Sometimes faith has to stand deeply before there is visible evidence. A room may still feel heavy, but faith keeps praying. Family members may still be divided, but faith keeps speaking truth. Fear may still try to return at night, but faith keeps refusing to surrender. This is important because peace does not always appear all at once. Sometimes it comes gradually, like dawn entering a room, little by little. The darkness that built its influence over months or years may not disappear in a single emotional moment, but faith keeps the house turned toward light until the atmosphere shifts. It keeps standing until what was once oppressive no longer feels welcome. Spiritual authority is the fourth part of the keynote, and this is where many people become uncertain. They understand prayer, they understand honesty, they understand hope, but authority sounds bold, and many people living in troubled homes do not feel bold. They feel exhausted. Yet spiritual authority is not about shouting louder than everyone else or performing some dramatic display. It is the settled conviction that fear, confusion, hatred, and spiritual torment do not have the right to rule the home. Authority is exercised when a person refuses to make peace with what is destructive. It is exercised when someone stands in the home and declares that darkness is not welcome, that division will not be fed, that truth will live here, that peace will be pursued here. Authority begins with inner agreement. If a person secretly believes that the darkness is stronger, then their words will carry no steadiness. But when a person knows that evil does not have the final claim over a home, their posture changes. They stop speaking like victims of the atmosphere and begin speaking like guardians of it. They become careful about what is allowed through the door, what is entertained on the screens, what conversations are fed, what grudges are kept alive, what habits are given space, what objects or influences carry ugliness into the house. Authority is not only spoken, it is practiced through what is welcomed and what is removed. A home has an atmosphere shaped by repeated agreement. If the house keeps agreeing with fear, fear grows. If it keeps agreeing with rage, rage spreads. If it keeps agreeing with falsehood, confusion deepens. But if the house begins agreeing with truth, prayer, faith, and peace, then the atmosphere changes. Then the atmosphere changes. This is why spiritual authority also requires discipline. It is not enough to reject darkness with words while continuing to feed it through everyday choices. A family cannot pray for peace and then spend every evening fueling anger, mockery, resentment, and moral compromise. The atmosphere of a home is shaped by what is consistently practiced there. This means restoration often involves cleansing. Sometimes there are things in a home that keep feeding unrest, not because they are magical objects in themselves, but because of what they represent, stir up, or keep attached to the life of the house. A wise family pays attention to what fills the rooms. What are people watching? What are they listening to? What language dominates the home? What spirit surrounds the conversations? What memories are being constantly reopened without healing? What grudges are being rehearsed daily? What habits are teaching the home to live in noise rather than peace? Cleansing the house often begins with cleansing the patterns. Peace also returns through forgiveness, though this is one of the hardest parts. A troubled home often carries years of injury. Words were spoken that cut deeply. Trust was broken. Needs were ignored. Fear was learned. In such a house, prayer can begin and truth can expose the wounds. But if forgiveness never grows, the atmosphere stays poisoned. Forgiveness does not mean pretending, ha, arm was small. It does not mean removing all accountability. It means refusing to keep the home chained to yesterday's poison. Bitterness is one of the strongest destroyers of peace because it keeps pain alive and active. It teaches the soul to revisit the wound daily. A home cannot become restful while everyone is still feeding the memory of injury more than the possibility of healing. Forgiveness is not always instant. Sometimes it must be chosen again and again until the heart softens. Yet it remains essential because darkness loves resentment. Resentment keeps every room spiritually dirty. It turns ordinary moments into opportunities for revenge, sarcasm, coldness, and emotional punishment. But when forgiveness enters, even imperfectly, the grip of the past begins to weaken. The house starts breathing again. People become less defensive. New conversations become possible. Forgiveness is one of the ways peace makes space for itself. Words matter in a home as well. A house filled with sharp, mocking, threatening, or despairing language will naturally feel darker. Words shape atmosphere. They teach the heart what to expect. They train children what love sounds like. They either invite safety or destroy it. That is why part of spiritual authority is guarding speech. In a peaceful home, people learn to speak blessing rather than constant cursing, clarity rather than manipulation, gentleness rather than cruelty, honesty rather than hidden attack. This does not mean everything becomes artificial or overly soft. It means language stops being a weapon. When words become cleaner, the wounds themselves begin to feel less violent. Peace also returns when routines of light are established. A home cannot be restored only in emergencies. It must be trained into peace through daily practice. Regular prayer, honest conversation, moments of gratitude, time spent together without hostility, care for the physical environment, boundaries around what enters the home, attention to the emotional and spiritual needs of children, intentional quiet instead of constant chaos. These practices may seem simple, but they are powerful because they build a climate where darkness finds less room to operate. Peace grows stronger where it is regularly fed. One of the beautiful things about restoration is that even a deeply troubled home can begin changing in small but noticeable ways. The first sign may be that arguments lose some of their intensity, or the nights become a little calmer, or one room no longer feels as heavy, or a family member who always withdrew starts opening up, or there is a new ability to pause before speaking in anger. These shifts matter. They are not small just because they are subtle. In a house that has been ruled by unrest, even one honest apology can feel like a door opening. Even one peaceful evening can feel like a promise. Light often returns by reclaiming one corner at a time. Children especially benefit when peace returns. They laugh more freely. They sleep more soundly. They stop living with constant alertness. They begin to trust the home again. Adults too begin to change when the atmosphere shifts. Their minds feel less crowded. Their bodies hold less tension. Their conversations become less sharp. Their hope begins to rise. This is why restoring peace in a home matters so deeply. It is not about creating a perfect image for outsiders. It is about healing the place where people are formed most intimately. A peaceful house strengthens souls. A troubled house wounds them. To reclaim peace is to protect the hearts living inside those walls. Still, restoration requires perseverance. A family may begin well and then grow tired. Old patterns may try to return. Fear may knock again. Tension may revisit certain rooms and moments. That does not mean the house is lost. It means peace must be guarded. Just as darkness grows through repetition, peace also grows through repetition. The home becomes stronger by repeatedly choosing prayer over panic, truth over denial, faith over hopelessness, authority over passivity. Over time, what once felt forced begins to feel natural. The house learns a new climate. Some homes may never have known peace deeply before. Maybe generations passed down tension, secrecy, anger, and emotional distance. Maybe the people in the house do not even have a model for what calm, truthful, prayerful family life looks like. Even so, peace can still return because peace does not depend on family history alone. It can begin with one person deciding that the cycle will not continue. One person can start praying. One person can start telling the truth. One person can stop feeding resentment. One person can begin blessing rather than cursing the home. Sometimes a new atmosphere begins with the courage of one soul who refuses to inherit darkness without resistance. A home filled with prayer, truth, faith, and spiritual authority becomes difficult terrain for darkness, not because problems never happened there, but because the house is no longer unguarded. Fear does not get to settle so easily. Confusion is confronted quickly. Lies do not find comfortable hiding places. Resentment is challenged before it hardens. Harmful habits are not excused forever. The family becomes more alert, more sincere, more rooted. The house is no longer spiritually asleep. And when a home is awake in this way, peace has room to remain. That is the beauty of the Git second keynote. Peace returns when the home is filled with prayer, truth, faith, and spiritual authority. Prayer invites the presence of light. Truth cleans out what darkness used to hide behind. Faith refuses to surrender the future of the house. Authority draws a line and says destruction will not rule here. Together, these things restore atmosphere, relationships, sleep, speech, and hope. They do not create a home without struggle, but they create a home where struggle is no longer crowned as king. The heaviness may have been real, the fear may have been strong, and the unrest may have lasted far too long, but none of that has to define the house forever. A home can be reclaimed, its rooms can breathe again, its nights can quiet again, its walls can witness healing instead of torment, and once peace truly begins to settle in a house, the people living there remember something they almost forgot. Home was always meant to feel like shelter, not war.